Hello, folks, and welcome to the Digital Campfire. Today we're jumping into Motor City, home of Dahlia and her unusual nature. Hope you enjoy. Okay. Motor City. A heavy, oppressive quiet hung in the air. The heavy black and white checkerboard pattern curtains are drawn fast against the window, as always, trapping the room in the artificial glare of the electric lights. It's a soft glow that glints and flashes off the brass face and the heavy brass pendulum of a towering grandfather clock standing guard beside the door. From the streets below, the muffled clatter of trolley carts on rails and the low collective murmuring of 100 people walking by drifted upwards, a reminder of the bustling city just beyond the brick. Yet inside that chaos is entirely conquered. Inside that chaos is entirely conquered by the seconds as it steadily ticks and talks. The room is clean, but well lived in, dark floral green wallpaper with eggshell white inlays, slightly peeling at the seams, wraps the walls, hanging in dark wood frames are technical schematics. Their paper already yellowed with age. Alongside a degree from High Knox Academy awarded to Lee Craftson beneath them. A heavy oak coffee table sat atop a worn decorative carpet. Its intricate black and white checkerboard pattern rubbed bare in the high traffic spots. On a plush white velvet couch sat 3 representatives of the Merchants Guild. Flanking her on either side are 2 men in impeccably tailored 3-piece suits. Sitting squarely in the middle is the lead representative, a woman with a razor sharp gaze, dressed in a sharp dark wool waist suit, her hair styled into a flawless, uncomposing finger weave. Yeah, uncompromising finger weave, Bob. Their expressions are unreadable as stone. In front of each representative sits a decorative porcelain cup, steam gently rising from the amber liquid inside. A matching ceramic teapot rests in the center of the oak table. Standing opposite them, a sharp contrast in rolled up sleeves and suspenders. Professor Lee Craftson. His dark green eyes sparkled with manic energy. He leaned over the table like a carnival barker, gesturing towards the center piece of the room. Resting on the wood between the teacups is a mechanical beast of a contraption, a heavy polished brass and steel juicer. It gleams under the dim amber light bulb overhead. All the interlocking gears and handle crank and the menacingly sharp conical press. It's a machine built for a factory floor. Yeah, it's a machine built for a factory floor, masquerading as a kitchen appliance sitting on the table. It looks less like a domestic tool and more like an industrial instrument of siege warfare. Entirely alien against the decorative eggshell porcelain and the unblemished white velvet across from it. Every exposed rivet and grease-slickened sprocket practically screams of grease and iron. A raw mechanical intrusion into a room meant for quiet warmth. Gentlemen and madam, what you are looking at is not merely a tool. It is the death keen of inefficiency, Professor Craftson proclaimed. Gesturing towards his machine. The modern household is moving a mile a minute. The old ways of manual extraction, dead, buried by the march of progress. He finished knocking on the table with manic energy. He placed his palms flat on the wood as he looked each representative in the eyes. The men looked towards the woman in the center. She doesn't blink, calmly raising her teacup and taking a slow, silent sip of her tea. Professor Craftson felt the silence disposition and unimpressed gaze in her eyes. He took a quick, sharp breath. You give the public a machine that can wring every single drop of nutrients from a grapefruit in 3 seconds flat, and you aren't just selling them time, you are selling them the future. And the Merchants Guild can own the exclusive rights to that future, he boasted. The woman sat her teacup down onto the saucer with a soft, definitive clink. She looked from Professor Craftson to the heavy brass and steel machine, her face a mask of professional skepticism. Professor Craftson locked eyes with her for several seconds. The only sound was the grandfather clock tick, tick, ticking away. Madam, if you please look closely at the gears. Don't just see a kitchen gadget. Think bigger. Think of the front lines. With this machine sized to scale, you can grind down entire meals, can them, and ship them off to the front line. You will own the exclusive rights to not only the machine itself, but the canned food as well. And all of that money will be going directly into the guild's purse. Professor Craftson finished, his voice dropping to a low, intense tone, thick with disappointment at the mention of the war. He leaned over the machine again, his fingers tapping a restless rhythm against the brass casing. Think of the front lines, madam. For years, our boys have been rotting from the inside out. Trench mouth, scurvy, tooth decay, men starving with packs full of hardtack and bully beef because their gums are too swollen to chew. And for what? Because a hot meal is a death sentence. You light a cooking fire in a forward trench, and the enemy artillery spots the smoke. Before the water can even boil, they are eating cold, congealed fat in the dark. He grabbed the handle crank of the prototype, giving it a sharp, aggressive spin that made the gears whine. But yeah, sorry, I got off track there. But with this machine sized to scale, you can grind down whole potatoes, fresh greens, salted beef, everything a soldier needs to survive into the condensed high calorie fuel. You tin it a boy at a boy at the bottom of a muddy crater can crack a can and chug a hot meal's worth of pure nutrients in 3 seconds flat. No fire, no smoke, no teeth required. It's a tactical revolution, and the guild will hold the keys to the entire supply chain. He finished with a heavy tone in his voice. As Professor Craftson finished his grand speech, a heavy silence fell over the room. Suddenly, the sound of heavy wheezing followed by the soft knocking sounds against the oak door. Professor Craftson held up a finger to the representatives and walked past them. He opened the door and looked down beneath him. The guild representatives either sipped their tea or stared at his invention, contemplating everything he just described at great length. Daddy, have you seen Princess Dahlia anywhere? A soft little girl's voice asked. Professor Craftson voice softened completely. Last time I saw her, you two were having a tea party on the veranda. Check there. If you can't find her, wait for me in your room. Once I'm finished with my meeting, I'll help you find her, he said. Okay, the little girl's voice replied softly. The footsteps and heavy wheezing grew quieter in the distance before disappearing entirely. Professor Craftson shut the door and leaned his back against it for a few seconds. He took a breath before walking back in front of the table, facing the guild representatives once more. As he took a breath before the professor could speak, the guild representative held up her hand to silence him. Professor, who is that? She asked, trying to hide the shock on her face. Ah, yes, that is my daughter, Professor Craftson answered, looking down at the table. You'll forgive the interruption, but she is of frail health, too cold, and she freezes, too hot, and she sweats like a waterfall, he finished. The guild representative tapped her fingers on the table, her brow furrowing. Professor, we have done business for years. I was under the strict impression that you were unmarried, she stated, looking him in the eyes. Ah, yes. I am unmarried, yes, Professor Craftson said, hanging his head for a brief moment before meeting her eyes. But what father would stand by and watch his child starve in front of him? My daughter cannot digest solid food, madam. It gets stuck in her system, making her sick, and starts to rot inside her. Hence the driving reason why I made this juicer in the first place, Professor Crafson said proudly. He stepped back to the prototype, placing a hand on the brass housing. I had some scrap brass and steel in my workshop. I went through 4 designs before coming to this one, and I can assure you that it works like a charm every time, so long as it is properly greased and maintained. Professor Crafson finished. The heavy wheezing sound suddenly returned to the hallway, followed by the triumphant voice of the little girl. I found her. The wheezing grew faint as the rhythmic sound of small, heavy feet began walking up the stairs. The lead representative finished her cup of tea, set the cup down with the same definitive clink, and pulled out her checkbook. She scribbled the information onto the paper with practiced speed before tearing the check off and presenting it to Professor Crafson. Professor Crafson gracefully accepted the check. In return, he handed over an envelope containing the neatly folded schematics of his machine. A pleasure doing business with you as always, Professor, the guild representative said, taking the documents and rising to her feet, swiftly followed by her flanking assistants. Professor Crafson simply bowed his head and showed them out of his house. The heavy front door clicked shut, leaving the house in a sudden ringing silence. He looked down at the decorative gold trim crisp paper check in his hand, letting out a long, ragged breath that felt 20 years old. He slipped the fortune into his vest pocket. Slipped the fortune into his vest pocket, turned and headed up the creaking wooden stairs towards his workshop. He found he found Dahlia sitting on a stool near his workbench, carefully sitting Princess Dolly down on a pile of rags. The mechanical wheezing in her chest is a steady, low click that mimics the rhythm of breathing. Her porcelain face turned towards him, her painted-on smile completely still, though her glassy dark green eyes tracked his movement perfectly. Are the bad men left? Her small, tinny voice asked. They weren't bad, sweetheart, just business partners, Professor Craftson said, rolling up his sleeves and picking up a wrench. Come on, help Daddy clear off the secondary assembly table, he finished. Dahlia hopped off the stool with a heavy mechanical thud. On her way over, she spotted. Oh God, I'm having technical difficulties. Keep trying to slide down the page and I keep overshooting almost everything. Yeah, okay. On her way over, she spotted a basket of fruit on the shelf. Wanting to be helpful, her small brass hand reached in and scooped up a bright red apple. Crunch. She stopped dead. Her fingers have dug in straight through the fruit, squeezing it into a mangled pulp of skin and core. The juice dripped rapidly from her brass palm, sizzling slightly as it hit the warm casing of her forearm. Oops, Dahlia said softly. Her porcelain head tilting to the side. My finger slipped. It's all right, Dahlia. Just a little too much pressure on the hydraulic valve, Professor Craftson said, gently wiping her hand with a rag. Try the steel brace instead. She nodded, her clockwork neck clicking as she turned towards the second assembly table, but as she passed Professor Craftson tool rack, a heavy horseshoe-shaped industrial magnet slid off a shelf and clanged sharply instantly on, snaps instantly onto her brass-plated shoulder. Dahlia blinked her glassy eyes, tilting her head. She reached up with her right hand and pulled it off, but the moment her fingers touched the steel, the magnet pulled, yanked it straight off. Hang on, I think I just misread that. Oh, with a mechanical pull. Mechanical pull yanked it off, straight onto her right palm. Daddy, she said, her voice tiny. She tried to shake it off, but it was stuck fast. Annoyed, she used her left hand to pry it away from her right. Snap. Now it was stuck on her left palm. She pulled her right hand away, tried to grip it again, and clank, it was back on her right hand. Professor Craftson watched from the workbench, rubbing his temples, though a faint smirk tugged at his mouth. Dahlia, use the table, he said, trying not to laugh. Pouting, Dahlia walked over to the workbench, pressed her magnet-covered palm completely flat against the edge of the wooden surface, and slowly, carefully slid her hand downward. The magnet caught against the edge of the wood, finally sliding off her brass fingers with a soft click. She looked up at her father, triumphant. I fixed it. I'm proud of you, sweetheart, Professor Craftson chuckled. Now, let's look at that steel brace. She nodded her head, her clockwork neck clicking as she turned towards the second assembly table. But as her fingers gripped the metal, the brass gears in her wrist whined with a sudden, terrifying twerk. With a sharp groan of protesting iron, the thick bar bent right in her grasp, wrapping into a perfect U shape. I did it again, she whispered, soft. Yes, she whispered, sounding generally small despite her devastating strength. Professor Craftson just sighed, a fond, tired smile touching his lips as he patted her warm metal shoulder. It's fine, sweetheart. We'll just need to adjust your regulators tomorrow, Professor Craftson said with a smile. Now let's get to work. Dahlia smiled at him as they got to work on their next project. Dahlia helped her father in his workshop. Time seemed to slip by in an instant. Before they knew it, the wall clock struck 8 p.m. Professor Craftson checked his silver pocket watch, confirming the time with a soft click of the lid. He looked over at his beloved daughter and smiled gently. All right, sweetheart. A proper lady should not be out when the sun goes down. Now go get yourself cleaned up and get ready for bed. Dahlia just nodded her porcelain head, her clockwork neck giving a soft click. Okay, Daddy. Professor Craftson followed Dahlia to her room. It is a chaotic wonderland of toys scattered across the rug and drawings on scraps of paper littering the floor. And Professor Craftson just shook his head with a small smile. He has no room to complain about the messy workplace. He helped her up onto a chair and reached for the small interlocking brass cylinder hidden at the base of her neck, and at the base of the back of her neck. With a practiced turn, he unlatched it. A dark and glossy crimson substance began to pour out from the opening as the fluid exited the intricate joints and pistons of the mechanical chassis went slack. The heavy frame leaned down as if losing its tension. Professor Lee expertly held a bowl against the base of the neck, catching the viscous, rhythmic flowing substance as it poured out. Slowly, the chassis went completely limp, turning into a hollow, lifeless shell. Professor Lee did not stop there. He carried the bowl from the table. He carried the bowl from the chassis and poured the crimson mass through a shifting, multi-layered mesh of fine copper netting. The slime forced itself through the weave, filtering out the mechanical residue, metallic dust, and grit accumulated from her day inside the chassis. Finally, when the liquid was collected in a glass basin at the base of the filter, the room was silent for a heartbeat, and then a tiny familiar voice echoed from the pool of shimmering deep red fluid. All clean, Daddy. Professor Lee set the bowl on an elevated table next to the now vacant mechanical chassis. He carefully placed Princess Dahlia on the edge of the basin, right beside the shimmering crimson mass. The silence of the room was heavy yet gentle. Professor Lee leant in, his voice dropping to a low, wary hum as he began to sing. Daisy, Daisy, give me your answer, do. I'm half crazy, all for the love of you. It won't be a stylish marriage, I can't afford the carriage, but you'll look sweet upon the seat of a bicycle built for two. The slime rippled amongst the almost imperceptibly, as if vibrating to the melody, as Professor Lee reached out, trailing a finger near the edge of the bowl, his expression caught between a father's exhaustion and a profound, quiet devotion. Good night, sweetie, he whispered. He turned down the gas lamps in the room, slowly fading into warm, flickering shadow. The mechanical chassis sat slumped next to the table, a hollowed husk, while in the basin, the only thing that mattered, his daughter, rested in the dark, safe and clean. Whew. And that is the end of chapter 1. I gotta get a bigger cup of water.
This concludes our broadcast day.
Farewell.